It's interesting how much of a bubble we live in. I own a GH4, but after attending NAB show this past week, it struck me how many people don't shoot with the GH4. I saw 7Ds, I saw 5D Mark IIIs, T3Is, T4Is, T5Is, Blackmagic cinema cameras, Blackmagic Ursas, FS100s, FS700s. I saw a few FS7s, and that was about it. Those were kind of the primary popular cameras on the show floor from people actually shooting and covering the event. So people making YouTube videos or content for their website, trying to get the news out. Those were the cameras. I didn't see a single GH4 being used in kind of that professional capacity. There were a few people who had them, but they seemed to be more kind of like walk around point and shoot cameras rather than anything else. And I don't know where this comes from because, you know, in my circles, we all shoot with the GH4. We really like it. The images are really nice. But I think there's kind of this stigma, or maybe it's just people overlooking the camera. But whatever reason it is, I wanted to talk about it just because I think this camera is so much more valuable than people give it credit for. The main key selling point to the GH4 is 4K. And everyone's doing 4K now. But I really... You're seeing it on the high-end stuff, like the Canon C300 Mark II. Arri's now doing 4K. Red has been doing 4K since the very beginning. Sony is supporting 4K over HDMI with the A7S. I expect that they'll implement 4K on their next DSLR-type camera. But the GH4, what Panasonic did with the GH4 and implementing 4K at such an affordable price point is just mind-blowing. And this isn't, I've heard people talk about, oh, well, it's, you know, you don't really need it. It's just up-res 1080. No, when you look at the files and you see how good it looks, so for comparison's sake, I have a 5D Mark III. Great camera for photos. And for video, it's kind of cool because you have full frame and it does pretty well in low light. When you put the GH4 video files up against the 5D Mark III, it blows them away. If the 5D Mark III claims that it's 1080p, it's not 1080. When you look at them side by side, it's not 1080. It's not even 1080. And the 4K from the GH4 is just, I can't even explain how far ahead of the 5D it is in terms of video quality. For photos, that's a whole nother thing. I'm a video guy. I don't worry about photos as much. I like to shoot photos. I do photography work, but I wouldn't use the GH4 for that. However, for video, you can't beat the GH4 right now. And it's not just 4K. So I did a video kind of comparison between the A7S and the GH4. And using the A7S, it's good. You know, the full frame sensor, really, really, really good low light. But the handling on the GH4 is so much better. The A7S is clunky. It's difficult to use. It's hard to navigate the menus. And when at the end of the day, when you're looking at the footage and you really can't tell a difference between the A7S and the GH4 stuff, the handling is what is sometimes most important. The battery life on the A7S is terrible. GH4 battery lasts forever. The GH4 also has a ton of really cool internal features, like built-in time-lapse mode, which I use all the time. There are so many times where I'm out just wanting to shoot a time-lapse real quick, and I don't have to worry about an intervalometer or anything like that, and I just do it right in the camera with a really easy menu. Take the shots, and the best part is it actually assembles the time-lapse in the camera into a 4K file. So you have all the photos, you can take them raw, JPEG, whatever you want, and it makes a video file in addition to the photos you already have. So you don't have to worry about pulling it into After Effects or whatever you want to use to compile the time-lapse and make it into a video. You can just do it right in the camera, which is so handy, especially if you're trying to get things done fast. What else does the GH4 do? Well, it records to SD cards, which in my mind is a huge selling feature. Most consumer cameras record to SD cards, but when you're talking about professional cameras like the Ursa or the Cinema camera or Red or Arri or any of these, you know, high-end cameras, they're recording to SSDs or CFast cards, and it's really, really expensive. You want to buy a nice camera to get good images, but in the long run, you're just shooting footage. And that's where the real cost comes in. If you have to spend thousands of dollars just for your memory cards, just to record, just to use the camera you bought, like what? The GH4 uses SD cards. You can buy them online for like 30 bucks, and you can buy as many as you want because you're never going to hit $1,000 worth of SD cards. I'm sure there's people who probably have, but you can get a lot of SD cards for that price compared to like one, SSD or CFast card. The GH4 is also really cool because it's got a mirrorless mount. The 5D Mark III, there's lenses that you can't put on that camera because there's a mirror box in there. The GH4 has that mirrorless mount. Now, the one thing I will say about the GH4 that's a drawback is the sensor size, micro four thirds, is slightly smaller than I'd like. I'd really like to see with a GH5 or some other product from Panasonic, them implementing a true Super 35 millimeter sensor. I don't necessarily need full frame. It's really nice to have that option, that flexibility, but I'd be happy with Super 35. But what you can do with the GH4, because it's a mirrorless mount, because you can put adapters and adapt lenses, you can get a Metabone speed booster or even one of the cheaper Lens Turbo Chinese knockoffs and put that on there and expand your field of view to where you're getting that depth of field and the viewing angle of Super 35. So if you put a speed booster on there, you're also not doubling, but increasing light by a full stop. So if you're shooting at 2.8 on the lens, the effective light is actually like f2 and so on and so forth. And you're, again, getting that depth of field and that look of something closer to Super 35. I'd like it if it was just built into the camera and you didn't need a special, glass adapter like that. But it's a really easy and simple way to fix that one small limitation. The GH4 also has high frame rate recording, so you can do slow motion stuff. A lot of the Blackmagic cameras, they have really nice features. They do the 4K, they, have good dynamic range, but they don't have those higher frame rate options. And for me, that was a big selling point for the GH4 because if I'm buying a camera, I want that camera to do as much as possible. I don't want it just to shoot 24. I want it to shoot 30. I want it to shoot 60. The GH4 even goes up to 96, although I honestly wouldn't recommend that mode because it really takes a hit in terms of image quality. But you can shoot up to 60 frames a second in 1080. You get really nice, pristine, HD, slow motion video. It's not as nice as like a Phantom or a Red or something that's specializes in high frame rate like the FS7 or FS700. But when you're in a pinch, maybe you're doing a wedding or you want something that's like, semi-slow but not extreme slow motion, throw the camera to 1080 and you can shoot 60 frames a second and get really smooth, really clean slow motion video with the GH4. The GH4 also has other really cool features built in that I always end up forgetting about, like you can set shutter angle. So oftentimes with photography cameras, you're setting shutter speed like 1/50th of a second, 1/60th of a second, and you're trying to match your frame rate to your shutter speed. And if you switch to, shooting 60 frames a second, you have to remember to switch your shutter speed to, 1/120th or 1/125th of a second is usually what it is. But on the GH4, you can actually set it to a proper 180 degree shutter angle. So regardless of what frame rate you're shooting in, the camera automatically knows what shutter angle to be, or what shutter speed to be filming with. So you set the shutter angle to 180 degrees and you leave it and you never have to remember it. That's a lot better than, the Canon DSLRs where you have to constantly adjust that shutter speed. They're adding anamorphic support in the new firmware that's coming out. They're adding log picture profile, even though Cinelike V and Cinelike D are already pretty flat enough, but they're going even further by adding log. There's just not enough good things I can say about this camera. It is so incredibly powerful and so versatile, and it's lightweight. You can fly it. If you buy a Blackmagic Cinema camera or Ursa or other thing, you have to buy an additional camera to fly if you want to put it on some kind of drone to get some aerial shots. And, some people are okay with that, but every one of these points in the process where you're buying additional stuff, it's more and more money that you're not spending on locations or actors or just other gear like lights. There's so many people who talk about, well, I needed, a 5D Mark III or A7S because I shoot in low light because I can't afford to get lights. Don't buy the expensive camera, buy the GH4 or something cheaper and invest that money in lights. You don't have to upgrade them as often. And that's actually going to make a bigger impact on your picture than the camera you're using. Even if you shoot with like a Red or an Arri Alexa, if you don't have lights, the camera doesn't matter. Trust me on this. The way to make something look filmic is to actually light it properly. So save your money. If you're really trying to pinch pennies, don't worry about getting a camera that can shoot in low light or no light. get a cheaper camera, and actually invest in lights. So yeah, I can't sing the praises of the GH4 enough. It is an incredible camera, very powerful, and honestly, if you are unfamiliar with the GH4, or maybe you know somebody who is, send them this video. Like, I can't understand why more people aren't using this camera. There's not once been a time where I've been on a shoot with the GH4 and been like, oh man, this camera really sucks in this situation. Actually, that's not true. The one time where that would happen is if I was shooting it in low or next to no light, because it's not the strongest in low light. But honestly, that's very rarely the case. I'm always using some kind of lights, and you don't need a lot. You know, just general fluorescent or low watt tungsten bulbs, even LEDs would be fine, and you'd be up and running and good to go with the GH4. And if you've never shot with the GH4, it's cheap. It's only $1,500 now. You can find it even cheaper on eBay, where it's, you know, $1,300, $1,200 with free shipping. You know, that's a really, really small investment in a camera that's so powerful. And if you're not even sure about doing that, you can always just rent it. You can get a GH4 for like $63 for 4 days from Lens Rentals. That's plenty of time to evaluate the camera and get, you know what, you're gonna fall in love with it. If you shoot high-end stuff with like Red or Alexa, the GH4 is not going to compete with those cameras, but it's close. If you're shooting with a Canon 5D Mark III, the GH4 will blow it away. If you're shooting a T3i or 7D or other DSLR cameras, the only other camera that I can even think comes close to competing with the GH4 is the Sony A7S, just because of the full frame and the low light capabilities. But everything else, I think the GH4 has it beat. And in my mind, I'd rather shoot with the GH4. It's got everything internal right there, so I can just pick it out of my bag, throw a lens on there, and I'm ready to go. I don't have to worry about carrying extra batteries because the battery life sucks, or having to run around with an extra, you know, external recorder so I can actually get 4K. It's all in the camera, all the cheap SD cards. It's incredible.